Thinking. All right, there we go. We're live.
Cool.
Hey, what's up?
How's it
I am.
going?
This is John Bukowski, everyone. As I've said before, I mentioned, I think in the little community post, my first non-YouTuber guest, but probably one of my oldest friends in music for sure. Going back to I think like the late '90s, I've known John for.
Yeah.
Um, and as you can see, I'm in a different location here. I'm kind of experimenting with the connectivity. I want this to be, a quality high quality of an output as I can manage. And lately, the lag has been kind of happening in the home office there. Not entirely sure why. So I'm in the guest bedroom, hooked up directly to a router. If you miss my background, I have something for you here. We can just go to this, and there you go. So we're back.
Imagine away to your record room.
Exactly. And yeah, there's been certain issues like a weird sync up thing. Like I was on another stream last Saturday, if you caught it. What are you listening to? Mike Foster in Japan, great dude. But he mentioned that my last Monday with Mike Seatown that there was a big lag in the beginning, and I think that has something to do with StreamYard. Broadcasting through StreamYard and scheduling one through YouTube. If they're not completely in sync, they kind of butt heads. And I tried to avoid that this time by deleting the advanced, YouTube thing, and it just kind of screwed me out of being able to do this immediately at 7:30. So there's always these boomer kind of problems that I'm having trying to figure this shit out.
Well, this is punk rock. That's how it goes.
Oh yeah, exactly. So I mean, John, like I don't know. I don't want to blow smoke up your ass, but I'm always kind of impressed by your love of music, what a diehard you are, kind of being a cornerstone of the Syracuse scene. Right now, I don't know what your main thing would be, but I know you've been doing the Dangerous Meeting radio show for how long have you been doing that now? At least 2 years, right? Maybe longer.
2 years. I just recorded my 93rd episode.
Holy moly!
I know it blew by. I don't know how it happened. It just the years just like disappeared all of a sudden.
God damn. What's up, Eric? My buddy Eric Bauer. Yeah, and what are some of the more notable guests? I mean, there are local guests that I was super excited about, like Jeremy Hare, who is the original bass player for Violent Fury, just a local death metal dude. Big influence on me, or like was very nice to me when I was like a 13-year-old skater kid, and like schooled me on a lot of death metal that was popular at the time. But you've had like
guys.
What's that?
He's hands down one of the nicest guys ever.
Yeah, extremely kind person. But you've had like Carl Buechner on there.
Mm-hmm.
You've had a lot of local people of note, and you've kind of branched out of the Syracuse thing too, right? Like you've got Brian Fair on tomorrow, don't you?
Yep, Fair's on tomorrow, which that one I'm really happy how that one turned out. I've done King Fowley of Deceased.
Oh yeah, that's
Matt
right.
Harvey of Exhumed. I'm trying to think, who else have I done? There's been a couple of others, but I'm feeling to think about what they are right now. A lot of them have been like semi-local ones, like Shane Dergee. He's in Rochester now from Framework and Gatekeeper and Farthest Man, who actually farthest back together, and I'm super stoked on that.
Oh wow, that's crazy that you mentioned that, because I've discovered this new pod. Well, it's not new; it's been around since the pandemic. But I'm just like whatever, like kind of out of touch with a lot of stuff, and it's really hard to keep up with everything going on and all the podcasts and all that kind of stuff. But Enterprise Hardcore podcast, done by Josh Lyons, who's a dude that I knew him when he was a kid, like when he was like 16, 17, when I lived in Rochester. But he's doing these great interviews, and I'm like, oh, tons of people I know from Syracuse and Rochester are on this. And so I've listened to the Tony Tornabene interview today. I listened to the Grant Johnston interview, the Andy Williams interview, the Sarah Miller interview. I'm like, oh yeah, these are all people, that I know from back home. And there's been a lot of mention of Farthest Man. And it might be in my brain somewhere. I might have scrolled through that on Facebook at some point and known it, not really registered it, because everybody has the attention of a gnat these days. But that's awesome, because they're a great, great band that I'm sure I'd appreciate now a lot more than I did when they were around.
All that I was really able to find, I had their split CD Eternal Youth, and those songs are really good. And they demo out that I just have not been able to flag down. So if anyone has a Farthest Man demo, send it our way. I would love to get my hands on a copy of that.
Yeah, that is. I never saw that many copies of that, to be honest, either. So so yeah, there's that, and you also are. I mean, technically, Ebony Sorrow is probably the first, at least second wave style. I don't think there's. Yeah, Ebony Sorrow is probably the first like black metal band from Syracuse, correct? Like,
um, I mean, Democracy came a little bit before us. We
okay,
we bit off them quite a bit. I'm not gonna lie. It was cool. We got to share a practice space with them. And my original idea when I started this in college, God, it was like 20 something years ago, was I wanted to make something that sounded like a cross between Turmoil and Dissection.
okay.
And I failed miserably. I basically I stole riffs from both bands and put them together and thought nobody would notice, and everybody did. And so I kind of had to learn how to play a little bit better. And eventually, as we kind of like moved along and I got a little bit better at my instrument, I started Dark Funeral and Knock Mystium instead.
And that you said it did clip out a little bit there, and I don't know if that's just on my end or not. You said you were inspired by and shared a practice space with Demonic Prophecy.
Yes, who was
Okay.
basically the original Violent Fury lineup.
Right, right. Because like it's kind of funny, and I know I've told you this story before. When I lived on the north side, and I lived with Mike Tommyrot, who has done all of the Ground Zero Salem artwork and stuff, guitarist for Black Sheep Squadron, you know, historian of Japanese hardcore and pro wrestling, good buddy of mine. I didn't live with him. I lived downstairs from him, and the guy from Demonic Prophecy used to walk down our street all the time. And I was like, who's that metal dude? Because he didn't, I mean, it wasn't just like he had like a certain look, like he had a black trench coat with like patches on it and stuff. And at the time, I was getting into black metal for the first time, like Emperor and, you know, the basic stuff. I was really into like thrash and crust and a lot of like metallic stuff. And I was like, that dude seems cool. And then like, I think we went to the Love Shack to try to get a practice space for Gygax, our old band, and we couldn't find the manager anywhere. And the only person in the entire building was that dude. And he was just like chilling in a room by himself, listening to Rush Limbaugh and ripping a bong. We're kind of like, hey man. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's, you know, so the days were wild back then, back when we used to practice, when we shared a room with them. Nick, the person you're talking about there, Nick Russo, super great guy. I bumped into him fairly recently, and he's doing a lot better than he was. He was drinking a lot at that point, like a lot. And we all were at that point. And Nick would ride his bike up to the room. And I don't know if you remember the Love Shack, how it was set up, but like the stairway was back here, which would kind of go all the way to the front door, where there was kind of like a almost like a patio with stairs. And every night Nick would get drunk and try to ride his bike off that ramp and jump over something. And I have never seen him once land it. But every night he tried for like 2 summers. And he actually like a couple people like lined up their motorcycles and he jumped over them, but when he landed, he just didn't land it. And
It's like
things out there sometimes.
extremely cult version of Jackass or something.
It was it was wild. There's stories that I can't really tell on the air.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, at the Love Shack alone, I mean, notorious 90s practice spot in 90s Syracuse. I mean, I practiced there, like not with Gygax. We couldn't, that was towards the end of it, I think. That was like late 90s. But me and MK and Greg Peer, our old band, Silent Running, my first band, practiced right next door to Blood Runs Black then. And even then, it was like a really sketchy. I mean, it's kind of funny because I look back at it. I'm like 15, 16 years old in this like sketchy warehouse with no heat in the dead of winter, you know, smelling weed smoke, like, you know, just trying to bang out songs with my band at the time. And I don't know if we got kicked out of there or we stopped. I don't know. We didn't end up practicing there for the duration. We ended up practicing in the drummer's basement and all this other kind of stuff. But yeah, definitely kind of a legendary, if not notorious, infamous spot for Syracuse for sure.
The building should have been condemned 15 years before we even knew about it.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing is, I want to say it like carried on for a while into the 2000s too. Like it was around for a grip, and
Yeah.
like it just got worse. But like beyond that, I mean, I know I would hear all kinds of stuff about shit getting stolen out of there, of course, which is kind of unfortunately the hallmark of like shitty practice spaces and stuff. But I don't know
Well,
beyond that, like what happened. And
a quick story
I
about
don't want to
um
I don't want to spread rumors or anything myself, but
Ebony Sorrow. We practiced right next door to Ed Gein. And or like our brother band, we both practice every night. We'd all hang out on breaks and everything like that. Found and hang practice downstairs. Like Demonic Prophecy was still around the corner, and last season was also across the way. And remember that guy Mondor? He was there as well. And we got hit one night, and I call that we had gotten robbed. We were on the first day we had gotten our stuff taken. I lost this amazing Marshall Valve state head. Like Cody lost like $1,200 in gear that she had just bought. Like Matt's kick pedals got taken. They took my bong, but like it was bad. And then like the second night they were like, okay, there's the second night they came back again and they hit every other room that they didn't hit the first night. So, but there was like 2 rooms left that I think that they didn't hit. And so the third night, me and Aaron Jenkins from Ed Gein parked around the corner and left our car there. And we waited all night in the band room with our lights off with baseball bats. And no one ever showed up, but we were ready.
Damn. So what have you, this is usually I don't really have much of a structure to how I do this, as I was talking about off stream, but I definitely do try to get into whatever my guest has been listening to and enjoying. Doesn't have to be music, but it leans that way. Like, what have you been into this week?
I drive around and I get to listen to music all week with at my job, so I'm really lucky about that. But what I've been listening to most at home, this first EP from Moonlight Sorcery here. It's called Piercing Through the Frozen Eternity. I bought it on a blind buy because I loved and it kind of sounds like if Yngwie Malmsteen produced the first Dimmu Borgir album, and I love it. It's great. New Tulis, I like that quite a bit. If you know Tulis, it's great. Mid-paced black metal from Norway. If you know it, you know it. It hasn't grown. It hasn't progressed anything. It's just great.
That Moonlight Sorcery, I listened to a bunch. It's fucking really good. The leads on that shit are out of this world.
Like, I got to get the new one. I see the new one just dropped, but the vinyl sold so quick before I even knew who they were. You know what I mean? So I got this new EP out. Oh, it is already sold out on pre-order. And like it's like $27 for like the CD version on eBay. So I'm gonna wait for it. I'm sure it'll get pressed again. Something that popular.
Yeah, for sure.
But I mean, also, I'm really big on the new Campfire record. New Campfire record is fucking awesome. It's like the best thing they've done since the Kavas record in like 2005. And fucking Nuna Coquin has been getting played today. Fucking love this thing. Like I had never heard this band, and then I got like a fucking promo for this record in my email for the show. And this is really cool. And then I got a whole bunch of promos at once, so it got buried after the first listen. And then I saw it on the binder site, and I said, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to order it. And I've been listening to it like almost every day since.
It's amazing. And not in a hyperbolic, like this band that sounds exactly like Bane is amazing. Like it's legitimately amazing.
It's incredible songwriting. Incredible.
Yeah. And a friend of the channel, Marty Worm, is the guy who runs Bindrune along with Austin from Panopticon. So like anything, like I was, until I got to be friends with that dude, I was aware of Handfaga and not much else. And I started exploring more and more of the Bindrune catalog. And I mean, there's a lot of astounding bands in the atmospheric kind of realm of black metal on that label, and it's tough because there's so many good ones. But if I had to pick a favorite, like Panopticon would be close. Nachachwin would probably be my favorite. There's just something about the kind of gallopy, almost like traditional heavy metal inspired stuff that they weave into the folkiness and the atmosphere and everything. It's so good. I've definitely tracked down pretty much everything they put out, and I own it on one format.
Like I've got that, and the split with Panopticon. That's all I have from them right now. But like I've been listening to them both quite a bit. What's cool is like they'll have like a riff that sounds kind of like a '90s Merciful Fate riff, and
Mm-hmm.
then they'll go into like with like a Native American flute, and like it's incredible. You never know what it's gonna do, but it's all makes perfect sense.
Oh yeah. And I don't know if you've heard it or heard of it. If Bindrune still has copies, it's probably really cheap. I don't think it didn't come out on vinyl, but the chief songwriter, or maybe both the guys, I'm not sure. One or two of the guys from Nichachwin did an HM2 Sweeteth kind of project called Unwilling Flesh. And I know that's a really saturated sound, but they do it so well. It's really good. If they still have copies on the website in the distro there, it's probably like less than $10. I'm sure it's really worth it if you haven't heard it.
Oh, I'll definitely check that out. I just pre-ordered that Kentucky 10-year anniversary thing they put out because I missed the first. So I definitely got my hands on that. Can't wait to get that on the turntable. I hope they do all the other ones too, because they all came out when I was broke.
Yeah, I'm sure they probably will. I mean, like, that stuff is like, I mean, Panopticon is that label's biggest seller as far as I know, and I know they're not like like a selective obscurity snobby type of go to Warx thing. They like to keep their shit in print, so it should be all that stuff will probably get repressed. I think.
Cool. I hope so, because like I gotta check out that label stuff more, because like those are really the only two bands on the label I know, except for like the bands that Panopticon kind of like done splits with, like Fall of Roros and Lake of Blood.
Yeah, they go back quite a ways. I didn't know how far back, but like my second guest on here was Marty, and I was like, oh yeah, how long you been doing binder? And it was something like pretty close to 20 years around that time.
No kidding.
But like, yeah, I mean, they've got a long running catalog of lots and lots of good stuff. So, but yeah, Falls of Roros are great too. I got to see them once in Boston, and they were fantastic live.
Man, I just got this in the mail today. The Incantation, a Diabolical Conquest reissue, finally back on vinyl after fucking years.
Yeah, did Relapse do that?
Yeah, they did. They're playing the record in full in a couple weeks in Philly at the Decibel Fest.
Yeah, I went to the one 5 years ago with Carcass and At the Gates for my like 40th birthday, and that was great. I'd love to go again at some point. We actually had tickets for the one last year, year before last, I don't know, around the time that we moved down here, and it just so happened that the whole situation happened with Amanda getting the job that she has down here, where we're almost considering flying back, and we were like, I don't think that's, we'll see. The older I get, the more I'm like, man, I really want to go to that show, and I have tickets, but I have to do adult things. So it is what it is.
When we bought the house, my wife and I had Portishead tickets, but like it was for like a week after we got the house, and it was in New York City, and we're just like, man, we just can't make this happen right now.
Yeah, you just can't. It sucks, but what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I don't know this poster personally, but I love the handle. Depeche Commode. My Incantation vinyl will arrive tomorrow. That's great. Let's see what I got here. Was there anything else that you had in your pile before I?
Just the fucking Subhumans reissues that I picked up yesterday.
Yes. Yep. Which one you got? Day the Country Died. What's the other one?
EPLP.
Mandatory. Yeah, I'm so glad those got repressed. I used to have the entire discography. I bought them all. I want to say I bought them all, not at once, but over like a maybe year period or something. In the like year I graduated high school, when I was going down to Albany for a lot of shows, and Crypto Comics, which I don't know if you ever were down there for that place, but it was a comic book store that Nate Wilson from Devoid of Faith and Monster X, etc. He more or less ran a really big distro out of it, that it was pretty much just like a record store / comic book store. And it was the only place. I mean, occasionally you'd find something at Oliver's, the shop that we had in Syracuse for non-locals. Occasionally you'd find cool stuff at Oliver's. It just depended on who like sold their collection and stuff. But there weren't really any places in town. I never made it to Knuckleheads out in the suburbs. I always heard good stuff about that place, but I never stepped foot in Knuckleheads. So like going down to Albany and seeing like every punk record, like at least classic stuff that I could possibly want. Like he had all the Subhuman stuff, he had Dead Kennedys, he had crust stuff like Doom. It was stuff that I couldn't, and I was never a big mail order guy. Like, for instance, like I was listening to the interview with Grant Johnson on that podcast, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I got into all the power violence stuff. Like me and my one friend from high school, we would just mail order stuff like crazy. Like I was always such a lazy kid when it came to like I did mail order stuff on a few occasions, but like I was so happy when downloading and the internet happened because I didn't have to like deal with the mail. But anyway, like I got all those Subhumans records, and I still have the original or earlier pressings anyway of Day the Country Died and Time Flies But Airplanes Crash. But all the other ones that I had, it was like one of those stupid things where I left them in a hot car and they all melted. So I'm planning on reacquiring most of the discography. I have a lot of their stuff on tape, which I think is a really cool format for the Subhumans for whatever reason. But also, and I accidentally, subconsciously plugged the hell out of my distro last time when I had Brain Smasher on. I don't want to do that. But I got a couple of copies of Day the Country Died because I was like, I gotta carry this. Like this is a mandatory punk record.
It's my favorite of all time.
Oh yeah. Have you ever seen them live?
No, I have not.
They sound perfect. I mean, it's just one of those things where like there's a lot of proof that not all punk bands are rudimentary musicians, like not all punk is like 3-chord shit, and if you want to show like a prog snob that like punk bands can like really rip and write like epic songs, like just point them towards like any Subhumans record, except maybe the 7 Inches, like just such epic fucking songwriting. And they sound like the records live, like they're so good.
Their tones are incredible. There's like, I never really like. There's like a Bauhaus thing going on with The Day the Country Died at certain points. Like it's like with with a lot of the snare rolls, the guitar effects. Like there's a very like a sort of vibe between the two. And
you know what I think that is? You know what I think the common thread is between those two bands? Influence of dub reggae. I think that's what that is. Just with that weird echoey element, and just the kind of the creepy like single note ring out kind of moments and shit.
Because they've done songs like that, like the Subhumans have.
Oh yeah, and they of course had Citizen Fish, which was almost like a straight up ska band, ska reggae, like really well done kind of ska. And then Culture Shock, the band in between, which I think they only did 1 record or 2 records or something, didn't have a lot of output. They were like kind of more dub-ish from what I remember. I haven't listened to that stuff in a long time, but yeah, Subhumans, fucking great, man. Love Subhumans.
Yeah, the later, like those two bands that you mentioned. I've never listened to Citizen Fish or Culture Shock.
I've never really gotten into either myself, to be honest. I've listened to them here and there, but I always forget about them, to be honest. And Citizen Fish was huge in the like 90s and stuff. They played like, as far as the punk scene goes, like before they reformed into, because I think it was mostly the same members that just with different names and stuff. Before they kind of reformed the Subhumans, and God, that was a long time ago. I remember the first time I saw the reformed Subhumans. It was probably the early 2000s or something like that. Before they started doing that again, Citizen Fish like toured in the US a lot, and they played pretty big shows. They kept it to the DIY like ABC No Rio type of venues, but they packed them out. Like they were pretty well respected and huge. But
you would see their t-shirts and rockabilia ads and things like that. You know what I mean? So like their name was getting around. I had no idea until years later there was a Subhumans guys.
Yeah. And I'm not like, I love old like late 60s reggae. I'm not far from an expert on it or anything like that. I probably can't name more than like 5 of the well-known artists off the top of my head. But I like that stuff, and I listen to those like Trojan compilations, and I really like two-tone ska, but any the ska past that period, like anything in the 90s, I loved it at the time. I certainly in Syracuse when we had like Too Hectic going and stuff like that. All that stuff was like really fun, but there's a few bands like that I at least respect, but I don't really listen to, like Mustard Plug and stuff like that. So I'm very selective about anything past like 1982 that's ska, but like certainly Operation Ivy, of course,
Of course.
and Citizen Fish are both really both great. So, but
I'm of the Losing Streak album from Less Than Jake and the Destruction by Definition album from Suicide Machines, but that's about as far as I go. But I love both of those albums so much that I don't need anything else from the genre outside of those two.
I was a big fan of Skankin' Pickle. That was like
I love that
they were
name.
like they were like a precursor to like a lot of the zany ska stuff and like long before Real Big Fish. They were like punk hardcore kids, I guess. And but like I don't know, I discovered their one album. I think it was just called like Sing Along with Skankin' Pickle. Like this was around the same time I was discovering like Screeching Weasel and stuff like that. I was checking that out, and I don't know. That was like my one like modern ska record I loved, and I probably could put it on now and sing along to the entire thing. I definitely listen to that thing into the ground. But
never heard of. I've seen the logo, I've seen the T-shirts and everything around, but I've never actually listened to it. But I've always laughed and loved the name.
yeah, they were pretty funny. Like they had some pretty funny song titles and stuff. I don't know how well that stuff will hold up, but speaking of British punk, hardcore, whatever, this is I'm fairly about 99% sure this is a fan club edition. Oh wow, that doesn't work. I guess I got to switch my deceptive background off. Hold on a second. Let's turn this off here. There we go, and we're back in the guest bedroom. All right, so this is the Chaos UK Death Side split. This is I'm 99% sure this is a boot. This has been kind of doing the rounds, or maybe it's like only semi-official. I don't know. But it's awesome. You know, if you don't know Death Side, it's raging Japanese hardcore.
Never listened to it.
Super. Oh man, you'd love it. I mean, the guitar work on it is insane. That certain strain of it's not like crossover metal like thrash, but it's so tight that it's breaching that a little bit, and the lead work is really cool. But it's like Discharge kind of paced, like fast hardcore stuff, kind of like pretty deep throaty vocals, but not death metal. You know, kind of roaring, almost kind of hardcore vocals. And Chaos UK, which this was during their period where they were getting less noisy and more kind of like street punk, pogo punk, which I really like that stuff. I know a lot of people that only swear by their stuff that sounds like a bunch of drunk dudes with guitars and spiky hair, like falling down a flight of stairs. That's fine. Like I like that stuff too. But this is like a little bit, you could tell they've been listening to maybe a little bit more American stuff. It's a little bit more like hooky and stuff like that. So I've been wanting this. This is kind of like a sought after record. I think that's why it's been repressed. Got that.
After this, send me the name of that in the message so I can check that out.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Death Side's awesome. If they're kind of along the same lines as Bastard. If you've ever heard Bastard, like it's just really raging Japanese hardcore. Definitely like Mike Tommy Rott's like bread and butter kind of shit. This is Planet on a Chain, Boxed In. This is the vocalist from Tear It Up with members of Look Back and Laugh. So again, I mean, we've got it's both sides of the LP, two-sided LP, but it's over in a blink of an eye. It's like less than 20 minutes long.
Okay.
Super raw, fast. I mean, they're not doing a straight up Discharge or Crust kind of thing. A lot of it just sounds like raging 80s kind of hardcore. It's on Revelation. So like it's pretty easy to find, you know.
Okay.
So that's really good. Certainly if you like any of their aforementioned bands, like Tear It Up. Dave is got this great iconic, like snarling, I'd say sort of in the wheelhouse of maybe Ray of Today on this, kinda, except he's not as like annoying as Ray can get. Dare I say it? I know that's like sacrilege or whatever.
I like Ray, but sometimes when he gets worked up, he sounds like Beavis.
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly, you know, the thing with Youth of Today with me is that for years, all I had was Break Down the Walls. And there's something about the production of that and something about the playing of that where like I had so much trouble getting into it. I listened to plenty of stuff like that, plenty of like faster 80s New York hardcore. And it's still not my favorite. It's got tracks for sure, but all their other records I love. Like Can't Close My Eyes, awesome. We're Not in This Alone, awesome. Like I like the other two way more. And it also sounds like it just he's going for it on that. And it might be the reverb on the vocals. I don't know. Something about that like really turned me off. Like always. I don't know why. And then this Wound Man record, Human Outline. This is a long-standing Massachusetts band. This came out on Iron Lung Records. This is, a very tastefully done hardcore that would appeal to people that like grind. Like it's not grind. It doesn't sound like early Napalm Death. I'm trying to skirt around calling it power violence because I'm not sure if that's 100% appropriate, but it certainly sonically is like that. There's lots of blasting and like slow crawls and shit like that. Just
Okay.
really, really good. So I have an older record by them that I seem to remember being a little bit more leaning into a crusty kind of thing. This feels a little cleaner than that one, I think. And this, I know I was evangelic about pushing this on you, John. This is the Flower LP, Hardly a Dream. If you like Nausea, the New York City Nausea, this is very, very much up that direction of sound. That doesn't sound good. This is very much like, sounds like the first couple times I listened to it, let me put it this way. The first couple times I listened to it, I was like, this is Nausea worship. This is like a second Nausea record. The more and more I listen to it, the more I'm like, you can pick out other stuff going on. Breaking down Nausea's component influences, like there's a lot of Discharge, there's a lot of Amoebics, there's some other late 80s crust stuff going on with it that's really, really good. Like a lot of the like Deviated Instinct, like the non-doom metal bands on Peaceville, like the kind of crustier bands, like I can pick that out of there a lot. You can hear some like international hardcore in there. It's really gloomy. It's produced really, really well. And I know it's a winner because it got posted, the entire thing got posted streaming on YouTube, and it was all positive comments except for one snobby dude that was like, this sounds too good. These are probably like clean cut hardcore kids that are just like trying to play crust. I'm like, that's a show of quality, that it's actually recorded well and played well. And like, that's not what they're all punk kids. They're all crusty punk kids. Like, I thought that was funny. I'm like, yep, that means it's good. And it's aesthetically, the record's done totally in that style. Like, I'm not going to unfold this, but it unfolds into a massive poster. This certainly looks a lot like Nick Blinko from Rudimentary Penai's artwork and stuff.
Okay.
It's really good. And
Definitely.
finally, I'm going to cheat a little bit with this one because I only spun this once, but I bought a bunch of their records at the same time. There's a label from Mexico called Chaos Records that do a lot of cool death metal stuff. And this band Question, I love this cover art, this like super psychedelic cover art. And this is almost like, I'd say not directly, but in a sort of a spiritual sense, it kind of reminds me of that band Stargazer from Australia. In that, like, the riffs are really good, it's really catchy, it's really punchy, but it's also like weirdly spacey and psychedelic and like goes off in odd different directions. It's hard to do like a cosmic or like, cerebral kind of death metal thing and keep my attention because I'm a Neanderthal and like I want mosh parts and like 3-chord circle pit parts. But like this band holds my attention really, really well. It's just really good, kind of mind expanding death metal kind of shit. Surely if you like Time Ghoul or Blood Incantation or Stargazer or any shit like that, like this would probably appeal to you.
Anything that gets put in the field of Stargazer, I've got to check out. I fucking love Stargazer and pretty much anything.
Yeah.
Like a Mournful Congregation, that's the same guitar player. And
fucking... yeah, I had my buddy Simon on here who's from Australia, and he was kind of breaking down all the different scenes and stuff. And I'm trying to remember, where is it, Perth, that all those bands are from? It's not Melbourne. I can't remember off the top of my head, but all those guys kind of share members, and there's a certain sound for that area of Australia. And I like Stargazer a lot. I like Sacrifix even more. And I wish that project would do like just one more record. Like they had they had a full length and like a couple of like a demo and a 7-inch or something like that. But that was even more like, I don't know, kind of like creepy, melodic, like almost kind of Hellenic. Like it was almost kind of like remind me a little bit of early Verathron or something like that. And it was World War I themed, which is, an interesting way to go with. blackened death metal or whatever genre you want to throw on there. So
They're called.
What's that?
They're called Sacrifix.
Sacrifix, as in the same band that was in the Gate. I think it's spelled differently.
Wasn't the fucking Dark Book? Like,
yeah. No, it's SACRIPHYX. I think it's spelled differently in the movie. If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. It's just like I think it's FIX. Like it's always been like I've always when I'm doing an album layout, I always want it to look like the Dark Book in the Gate. I want like the page. I'm like I want it to look like this, and everyone always thinks that I'm fucking crazy. But I always bring it up every time Ebony's going to do a layout. Like I want it to look like the Dark Book, and no one knows what I'm talking about.
All right, I can go back to my room here. Let's go back to my record room. All right, there we go. I'm back. So, what else is going on? Like, you've got Brian Fair on tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be an interesting conversation because I've met that dude a handful of times. I actually worked with him. I keep forgetting that. I was never a fan of Shadows Fall. Like, always, liked those guys and respected them, but not really. I liked the first album before him with all the Remains guys. And I loved Overcast, of course. But I worked with him, and he was always such an amicable dude. He was I worked at an ice cream and coffee place in Harvard Square called Tuscanini's, and he was the delivery driver that would pick up stuff, and because there were 3 or 4 locations, he'd drive around to all of them. Kind of funny.
He talks about that in the interview tomorrow. He talks about working there.
Oh no shit.
Basically, what happened was after the last Overcast tour, they lost so much money, he had to get 2 jobs. That was one of them. He got a job at that ice cream place, and then there was a burger place that all the punks worked at, and he worked there as well.
I wonder what place that was. I probably know of it because we worked in the same area at the same time. Yeah, he had always had great stories about like hanging out with King Diamond and stuff like that. So, and even before I worked with him, I met him. When did I meet? I met him when Overcast. What show was that? I think it was the one they played with Bloodlet at the Planet. I think I partied with those guys because like certain bands would come to town and like where are the kids that aren't straight edge? You know what I mean? So it was that era that I lived with like Mike Lewis and like we had to kind of the house where we blazed or whatever. So so that was same thing with the Bloodlet dudes too, actually, now that I think of it. But do you have a favorite? I mean, I know it's hard to, those kind of questions are obnoxious. I mean, I'm sure you have more than one guest that you've had on the radio show that you've like, that it's hard to pick a favorite kind of thing, but any standouts, put it that way.
Like the one with Brian Fair came out really well. That was a really great interview. I really enjoyed the episode I did with King Fowley. He is a great storyteller. Great fucking storyteller, and he picked some cool songs. And on the second episode, we went through one song off of each Deceased record, and he talked about that song, and that was pretty cool. And it was just really cool to like shoot the shit with him when I've been listening to fucking Deceased since I've like 15 years old. So,
yeah, I mean, yeah, me too. I remember hearing Robotic Village on the Corporate Death compilation, and it's so funny because back then, like, I'm sure you can relate. I mean, I've got a couple years on you, but not a ton. It just the whole kind of pre-internet thing where, or when you were a kid and broke, like I just had that compilation for years, and those were the only tracks I had by those bands, like Repulsion, Deceased, Early Incantation. I was dependent on our good friend Matt Kinney for dubs of a lot of stuff, because I didn't have a job until I was like 16, 17. So. A lot of it was just like whatever I could find. And also, I was at the mercy of whatever mall record stores were accessible to me. And the stores at Fayetteville Mall had better death metal than the stores at Shoppingtown. And I just couldn't make it to Fayetteville Mall as much.
And like, you mentioned Knuckleheads earlier. And I grew up about a 20-minute walk from there. So I moved there when I was 16. I remember the day after we moved in, I walked up there and they were closed because for some reason they were closed Sunday through Tuesday. But I went back up there after school on Thursday with like $7 and found out they had like all these killer like Pink Floyd bootlegs and Nirvana bootlegs, and like, of course, like it was like the Marilyn Manson era. He was brand new, so I was really into Portrait of an American Family, and they had like like all the singles and things like that. And but I would go through the used vinyl section, and I got an OG press of Venom's Black Metal for $1.99.
Sick.
And
Yeah,
like,
there's always those stores,
fuck, like I got so many things at that fucking store that I used to walk up there and I would just like whatever I got money, you know what I mean? Okay, I cashed in $7 in bottles. What do they got? You know what I mean? Fucking go there, like get like a $2.99 My Life with a Thrill Kill Cult record or KMFDM or actually I was just talking with my wife about this yesterday. Fucking remember that band Fetus, that English like fucking industrial guy?
I think he was American. Well, no, he's Australian, I believe. But anyway, yeah.
Well, fuck it. A 12-inch single from them and had one song on the A side that was really cool. And then I flipped over the B side, and the B side was literally just 12 minutes of the same three notes going dun 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 dun. And so whole thing thinking it's got to change at some point, right? It's got and like 6 minutes in, I'm like, I don't think it's gonna change. But at this point you're committed. And it made it to the end, and like it got to the point where like if I wanted to annoy somebody, you would play side 2 of the Fetus record.
Trolled by J.G. Thirlwell again. Yeah, I had one record like because it's also funny. I was thinking about this earlier, like being in a smaller city like Syracuse, and obviously you and I and other people that grew up when we did discovered the Sunday matinees, and it kind of went out from there. There was like-minded people. There's kind of a separate metal scene and a hardcore scene, but there was always kind of crossover between the two and everything. But being, at least for me, like being a city kid, there weren't that many people that went to like Levy and Nottingham. Like, I'm, of course, getting really local here, but the schools, it was, in Syracuse, on the east side, there were only a handful of people that liked the same music as me that went to my high school at the time. And one of them was Ethan Jenks, who's still around, I think still playing in bands and stuff. And his whole angle was he was really into alternative and punk. And for me being a metal kid, like I knew about GBH and the Exploited because I skated too, and the t-shirt ads and Thrasher kind of pointed me in that direction. And also you'd see members of Metallica and Exodus and stuff wearing Discharge shirts and whatever. But Ethan's older brother went to Potsdam and would always come home and bring all this weird shit, and I'd get mixtapes that Ethan would make with like No Means No and Skinny Puppy and old hardcore and stuff, like not the type of hardcore I was hearing at Syracuse shows. And it really helped fill in gaps for me, like early DRI, of course, and like weird punk bands like the Toy Dolls and all this stuff that like I was just lucky to make certain friendships, it was like definitely a good education at the time, getting to know people like that. And it's so funny how like one or two people can be a make or break thing, whether or not you know about this stuff at all pre the technology we have.
Like I don't think like people like if they weren't around for it, you don't really understand what we had to go through. I was a big part of like tape trading. I was really, really into that. Like I would be people like the back of Metal Maniacs and be like, okay, this person likes this. I would like send my list and he would send me his. And I found some great bands that way. Bands that were close to me. A band from Albany called Everdark. It was on they were on Full Moon Productions. And they did a EP called Birth. It was really fucking good that this girl sent me on the B side of Cataclysm Sorcery, which I what I mean? Like I had no idea who Cataclysm was. I got a tape of it.
Yep.
Those days, like it was so special when you would get something, when you would find something, it would become yours because like nobody else fucking knew it. You know what I mean? Like I was like, I got this band Cataclysm, you all gotta fucking hear it. It's the fastest thing. And I miss that. Because like as cool as it is being able to fucking just open up my phone and play any single goddamn song I want in the world in 3 seconds, like it kind of takes the magic away from it for me.
Oh, for sure. And like, I think that was part of my, like, whatever it is, like state of arrested development or, clinging to the past as much as I possibly can, type of thing. Like I started tape trading 5 years ago, which is funny. Well, I mean, let me put it this way. I did it a little bit when Matt and I did the Angel Puss zine, which was like my junior year of high school, I think. Sophomore and a junior year. We did one issue. it's crazy because it's like I interviewed Will Romer, and like the interviews were like Half Dead from Utica, Mortician, Blood Ritual from the Pacific Northwest, I think Internal Bleeding, and Black Train Jack. Weird. But during that period, that was the closest I ever came to like I was mail ordering stuff here and there, and writing to bands, and like we were talking to Cryptopsy when they had like only a demo out and stuff like that. Talking to bands on the phone. Like I don't remember who from Cryptopsy I talked to. I think it was Flo. I don't remember. Just remember talking to like a really nice like French Canadian dude like over the phone for like an hour about music and stuff. And I mean, it was cool. It was a cool time. Unfortunately, or whatever, like I kind of got out of metal for a while. I kind of burnt out on it. And like my senior year, I wasn't listening to that stuff that much. And it's just one of those things that kind of organically happened. Like it wasn't a conscious decision. But I did do it for a little while. And then fast forward to years and years later, I think it was through the Nuclear War Now board, I struck up a correspondence with a couple of people. One is a dude from Germany who I've kind of lost touch with, but the other one's my friend Mario from Costa Rica, and we're doing like massive because we're at this point we're grown ass men with like jobs and stuff, so doing these massive like 40 cassette like, and what is kind of nice because as deep as the internet goes, there's always going to be something that's like not up on YouTube. There's always going to be something that might be a little gem, a little nugget, and it was really fun when I had time for it to just like type out these descriptions and write up these lists and stuff. Because I wanted to experience it. Obviously, it's not the same. You're sending emails back and forth instead of writing, sending stuff through the post, and it's you're able to like scan stuff on your nice like little printer copier thing that they definitely didn't have back in those days and all that kind of shit. So it's kind of cosplay, but it was very fun to do. And right now with our buddy, our good buddy Matt, in your neck of the woods, we're sending mixtapes back and forth, and that to me feels totally organic. Like that's something I love doing. I always will.
Making a mixtape is something that I've enjoyed doing as long as I could remember. I actually, I made a mixtape for my wife. My wife I actually hit on all throughout high school, and she still has a tape that I made her. That one side was all death metal, and the other side was all prog. And like it had like fucking like fucked with a knife on side one, and it had like Al Stewart Year of the Cat on side two, and fucking like I'm like, huh, I wonder why this girl's not dating me. It's the weirdest fucking thing. But and
yeah, there's a tape with fucked with a knife on.
Yeah, but like she still has the tape. I actually have it in my nerd room over there. It's called Serenades for the Sick Part 2. Because I made one that I don't remember, but it's not there anymore. I can only imagine what I put on that. But we still have, and I have like this fucking giant grand idea, and I always want to start it, but I'm the kind of guy who gets a big idea, and then once I start it, I'm like, oh my God, I'm never gonna be able to fucking finish this, and I get overwhelmed. And I want to have like make the ultimate mixtape set that's like 75 tapes long, where you do like fucking like 1,800 different bands and like one song from like each album, make it all perfectly fucking flow. It's just like, it's like a pipe dream, but it's something that I've always like dreamed about doing.
Yeah, I mean, and like again, like I don't want to be too much of a cornball and wax poetic about it, but I mean, you can definitely make a great playlist or even mix CD. I mean, that's essentially the same thing. But there is something about like having to like pull out vinyl and like let's listen, listen and be like, I'm gonna put this song next, and then starting to record it and being like, I don't think that'll go great with it, and just that whole process. I think it helps you form a deeper appreciation for what you're listening to. And also something about like the mixtape. I made a 2-hour, 120-minute mixtape for MK, and I made a copy of it for myself, and that's a sign of quality. I'm like, okay, I'm proud of this. Like, I can listen to it because I just use an aux line and a Walkman to listen to tapes in my car. I was listening to it back over and over, and like the tapes he sent me too. He sent me 2 great ones, and I got another one in the mail today. I'm like, oh crap, I gotta make another mix from MK. Like this man's a machine. But like, and all of his have been great. Obviously, like he's a fantastic. He's got a fantastic taste in music, and fellow lifer to us and everything. So, are you? Are you still doing you're still doing dialysis like whenever Ryan's around, right?
Whenever Brian's around, yes. We have six music for six new songs, like pre-production done. However, they were recorded a little over a year ago, and we've pretty much all but forgotten them at this point. I
Okay.
have them in my Dropbox, and we played a line of shows with this band Wipes, Core on Hex Records, and Brain Cave, and fuck it, we played one new song, which is gonna be the title for our album if we ever do it again, called "The World Is Your Toilet."
Okay.
And we have like a little mascot drawn, like named Flushy, who is gonna fucking it's if it actually all comes into fruition, it's gonna be fucking great. We have great ideas, but with living on two sides of the country, it's harder than I thought it was gonna be, honestly.
Yeah. Just to the uninitiated, and stop me if I misrepresent you guys or anything. Dialysis is a band that's a three-piece with no bassist, guitar, vocals, drums. The singer plays saxophone. Is that just on one song? I'm trying to remember.
A couple songs. There's a couple.
Songs. So it's like almost like it brings to mind like Siege or something like that, like this weird like aggressive music with like sax and a couple songs, but it's as short, fast. Like I don't know. I wouldn't classify it as grind. I wouldn't classify it as power violence, but it's very good. Like the records are out there. They're on Hex Records. Ryan Hex from Syracuse, who another cornerstone of the scene, who moved out to Seattle, to Portland a while ago, was the singer for The Funeral and No Idols. Great frontman. Another one of my oldest friends and everything. That band rips. But when you guys were forming that, like, what was the idea? Did you have anything in mind? Or did you just like play short, fast songs? Or
It, it started because like I kind of wanted to do a grind thing, and when we were doing Ebony Sorrow, I started bringing all these fucking songs that were like a minute long, and like it got to be the point where we wrote like 4 songs for a minute long. I was like, wait a minute. I was like, I need to make a separate project for this. And so like the original idea, I was like, oh, it sounds like a cross between Terrorizer and Os Rotten. And it didn't like the demo way. And then after that, once we actually started all writing together, it became something completely different that I don't like. By the I think the 2 7-inches, you could really see the influences are very derivative, but I think the LP, we've really found our own sound. And it breaks my heart because we put our fucking heart into that LP, and then like as soon as it dropped, and we were all so happy with it, like we just kind of had to stop.
Yeah, it's a great record. I've been meaning, I got to hit up Hex about grabbing some of his stuff to sell too, because I want that Funeral double LP discography up there as well.
Oh, good.
Yeah, yeah. I don't even think. No, I don't think I've caught you guys. I don't. Yeah, no, I haven't. Because that was long after I'd been in Boston for quite a while when Dialysis formed, and I came home semi frequently, but
yeah,
I think I actually caught you guys.
We played around around the East Coast like quite a bit. Like we were Weekend Warriors for a couple of years when we were fucking touring those 7-inches. We did that. We'd go out probably like 1 or 2 weekends a month for like about 2 or 3 years. We played a shitload of shows. But like I don't know, like we had fun. We're still continuing to do it whenever Ryan comes home.
Yep, it's cool. And that latest Ebony Sorrow came out 1 or 2 years ago. I'm trying to think.
They came out. Oh god, we recorded it forever ago, and then right when we were going to put it out, COVID hit, and then we sat on it for probably we sat on it for probably about like 1.5 years, 2 years, and then when we were like, okay, well, we're finally going to play that show with Demlick, so let's press it, and then it's been selling all right. Actually, I got to make a second pressing of it, so I'm pretty stoked.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm only spamming my distro groundzerosalem.com because I want to spam your CD. I have 1 copy of it for sale. It's great. Black metal, kind of thrashy black metal, I'd say. I mean, were you going for kind of thrashy black metal? I don't know.
We started to, like the black metal was there. Like I wrote 3 of the songs on there because like they were written before the 2 guitar players we have now were even in the band. And so like by the time like Rob joined, then we kind of started playing around. Then Alex joined because I couldn't play what Rob was playing because he's much better than me. And so we hired Alex, And fucking, I don't know what the original intention was. We had a whole bunch of riffs that we were into, and it was my genius idea. I was like, hey, why don't we fucking record it live and have a great punk rock feel? And it became a goddamn expensive nightmare.
You'd think it wouldn't, but I guess there's a lot that can go wrong there.
Oh, it wasn't my best idea, and we'll never do it that way again. We did it like with the old lineup. That's how we always did it, because the songs were real simple, like verse, chorus, and not like the new stuff like that Rob and Alex are writing. It's just like I say it sounds like a cross between like Stargazer and Gorgoroth.
Okay, yeah,
and
I can see that.
When people ask me what it sounds like, that's the only thing I can really think of. And it wasn't a good idea for me to think, guys, come on, we'll record it live. It'll be great. I should have let them talk me out of it.
And you also book the occasional show, correct?
Mm-hmm. I used to do a lot more than I do now, but I still do them here and there.
What was the last thing you booked?
Sonia.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
They were awesome. They sound just as good as the fucking record. Sweetest people that you'll ever meet in the fucking world. And it's just, I've known their drummer Jeshik forever, and I've known their bass player Ben forever, since they were both in Woe, and Woe used to come here all the time. So,
oh yeah,
I was really excited to meet Melissa, because I actually met her when CrossFitter came through, when I booked them with Demlik. But
okay,
she's super nice, and she rips. Like watching her play, like especially when you're watching CrossFitter, is just insane. And the show went pretty well.
Good. Yeah, I'm trying to think. What was your first? Because I remember you booking shows like way back, like at Planet 505 in the 90s and stuff like that. One in particular, I don't think it was all you, but I always remember I wasn't there for it. I kind of wish I had, because I got into them way later. But it was like In Satanity, early like demo era Hatebreed, I think. Like,
it was my first show I ever booked.
Yeah. Okay.
I had booked In Satanity, the Dillinger Escape Plan, and Navi, who later became the Luddite clone. And Keith had called me up, and he said, hey, he's like, Hatebreed and Cause for Alarm are looking for a show. And I thought, well, this could be really cool. Like, I'd never heard Hatebreed, but I really like Cause for Alarm. You know what I mean? That they're on Victory, and I know that Hatebreed is starting to get big. It could be cool, and it's my first show, so I could definitely use a hand.
Yeah.
It was the day after Thanksgiving, and I think there was it was either Madball or Sick of It All or there was some show like that on Thanksgiving night at Hungry Chuck's, and we didn't make flyers until the night before the show, and we passed about at that show. And based on that alone, on one night advertising, it brought in 145 people to Planet 505. And
pretty decent. I mean, that's a small cap place, so it's a pretty decent haul.
And so I was like, okay, great. So I thought that's how all shows worked. And so I definitely learned through trial and error that that's not really how you're supposed to do it. And after feeling terrible, giving bands $5 to go home, you know what I mean? But you live and you learn.
Ben, my buddy Ben, is asking, the Stargazer and Gorgoroth comparison is that the new stuff you're writing for Ebony Sorrow?
Yeah, I would definitely say that's exactly what the new stuff is. We're actually getting ready to do a new 2-song 12-inch called Isolation and Immeasurable Loss. Cool. And the cover artwork is actually done by Tom Ward.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Love Tom Ward. So
we're supposed to start recording at some point in the spring. We're hitting a few snags, so we'll see what happens. But the song is written. We just need to tighten up the second one a little bit. We've been playing one of them live for quite some time. Who's
putting out the record?
Me. I can't find anyone else stupid enough to do it.
Nice. That's good. Well, I'm glad that you're going to be releasing something again, because I liked everything that Cult of Nine did.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I really, really enjoyed doing it. I really am looking forward to doing it again. It's just like I hit like a wall. Once COVID hit, and I put so much heart into the one release, and I was so excited because I thought this release was going to do so well, and then COVID hit, and during the whole thing they ended up breaking up, and so I put so much money into that, and then like everything else just like like my dog passing away and everything like put me into like a fucking
Yeah.
depression, lost interest in all the things. I had a whole bunch of awesome things slotted, and I just kind of like dropped the ball on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to maintain momentum with stuff when you're working, and you have to pay the rent or the
Yep.
mortgage, whatever, and feed yourself. It's a lot. Like I'm involved in some projects now, like this channel and other stuff. Get yelled at by Ben again. Um, and I'm just like, I have to make it a point every day to like, because I'm not an organized person. Like I'm just not. Like I am in some degree. Like I mean, look at behind me. Obviously, I'm organized somewhat. But in terms of like setting tasks for myself and staying on course, even with the stuff that it's like hobbies that I enjoy. Like I have to be like, okay, yep, I got to do that. And and thankfully I have an open enough schedule where I work a fair amount. I'm technically full time, but I only work 3 days out of the calendar week. So I have time to put aside for, you know, for basically the aging metalhead equivalent of like dad's trains or whatever, like putting together my train set.
Right. Yep. It's like I said, my record room, we call it my nerd room because it was the guest bedroom, but I kept on buying stuff and eventually I had to get the bed out of there.
Yep. I've been there. It's been a while. I think there was still a bed in there when I was in there. Can't remember. Well, that's cool. I'm glad you're putting something out again. That's good to hear. Yeah. And yeah, are you booking any shows soon or anything like that? Or are you good with that right now?
I've got a couple things that I'm interested in that I'm working on, but like nothing really that's like solid in stone as far as shows. Like Ebony Sorrow was supposed to play in Binghamton with Sulaco.
Oh, cool.
So that should be cool. Hopefully that works out. And I really don't have too much planned. We've been just kind of like focusing on like finishing up the writing and getting everything ready for that because it's like 2 10-minute songs. You know what I mean? So it's definitely out of our comfort zone of what we usually do. So we've been working on these 2 songs for 3 years. So I haven't been booking too much,
Gotcha.
but hopefully I'm hoping I don't know, like a lot of bands aren't really like, as far as like the bands that are touring, like none of them really want to come through Syracuse. There's a lot of like major city stuff. You know what I mean? Like there's bands that I would love to get here. I tried to get City of Caterpillar here on the last tour and I couldn't make it happen.
Right.
But
yeah, it's tough, especially now. Like, I mean, Syracuse has a long storied history for certain things, and like, I mean, I always would like, and I'm sure, you can relate to this as well. Like, there would be this basically one type of metal that was massively popular that packed out from the beginning of the 90s or mid 90s into like the era of Hellfest, like thousands of kids in the area were into and would come out for. And I remember, going to the Lost on Sundays, and this is between 92 and 95, going to the Lost on Sundays. And like some of those McKeg shows actually didn't do great, like some of them were only like 50 people, but most of them, like a lot of people came out for. And then going to see like the local death metal bands, going to see Violent Fury and Canine Christ and all those bands that were awesome and not like, they're, it was all older. I'm sure at the time was like 22 or something, like I was 16, but, and just being like, I'm being kind of bummed and being like, wow, why aren't there more people for like the local, just straight up metal bands, So, but I mean, national bands would come through, I saw Cannibal Corpse on the Bleeding Tour and saw Entombed. I think it was Wolverine Blues they were touring on. And like those shows always were pretty packed to the gills. But over the years, I don't really know. Like, I mean, I haven't been there. I think the last metal show I was at in Syracuse at the Lost was before Griffin was even born. So it was more than 7 years ago. It was a Incantation playing with Faith Extractor. And that seemed to be okay. But it was more than half capacity, but it wasn't like, like compared to like, I don't know, when I saw Entombed or Typo Negative, like way back in the 90s there, where there was like no room to breathe. I mean, it was pre the White Lion thing.
Right.
But like, or like that one, I was never really much of a fan, but seeing Marilyn Manson at like the infamous Riot gig where they like tore down the ceiling and shit, like that was ridiculous. Like that place was packed beyond capacity. Like it was like twice capacity or something. And I don't even know if like how to what extent the Lost like does stuff these days. I'm not even sure like what the status is of that place.
Things happen from time to time. Actually, next week I'm going there to see Earth Crisis and One King Down. It's the
Oh
30
yeah.
firestorm, dude. 30 years. How does that make you feel?
Old. You know, I mean, I was there when I was there when that the record release show. So people are like, I jokingly, I had a few friends actually that noticed that were like, "Are you going to try to go?" I'm like, I would love to, but I can't get up there. I'm like, and plus I was there for the original one, so you know, I mean, I got to see that.
It's
But
it's crazy what 10 years will do, man, because fucking 10 years ago, Earth Crisis did the 20 years of Firestorm with The Lost Horizon. And Shai Hulud played, and some other good bands played. I can't remember who exactly played, but it was a great show. And it was less than 100 people.
oh
And
wow,
this one, the whole show sold out before I got home from work.
damn, I don't know.
So I don't know, man. Like, it's just funny. It's like a whole new generation is getting into, like, right now in Syracuse, we got a whole bunch of good young hardcore bands. You know, you got like Deal with God, you've got Womb, you've got fucking God. There's so many that I can't even remember their fucking names. Like, but they're like young kids and they're killing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And there's really good stuff going on here. And so through again. Next Tuesday, One Step Closer is playing here. Which is cool. They reminds me a lot of like, you know, like all Shai Hulud and Bane and stuff like that. I'm debating going because I'm afraid I'll look like a sexual predator if I walk into that room. I'll be like
you
the
know,
old guy.
the narc would be the narc.
Yeah, exactly. But it's at the Furnace. The shows are happening at the Furnace again, which is cool.
I see. I've never even been to that place. Like I've been away so long. Like when I first moved to Boston, back to Boston, because I lived in Boston 2 different occasions, but I moved back in 2006, and like between 2006 and 2011, when 2011 I went back to school to be an X-ray tech, and you know, so I got pretty tied up with that for a long time. Also pursuing a real career and stuff. But when I was still like, I mean, I was still broke, but like I would come home to Syracuse like 4 or 5 times a year at least. Um, and I mean, I'd love to come back sometime soon, but as it stands right now, money's money's okay, but you know, I only have so much PTO, unfortunately, and like we've never gone back to Ohio to visit Amanda's family. Like it just hasn't happened yet, and I really got to do that before I
Yeah.
bring everybody back to Syracuse because it's we've never she's been there without me, but I really want to go. And this time hopefully everything works out with like time off and what's going on with my dad and everything. But like when we go and visit, she is like a hop, skip, and a jump from Louisville. So I've mentioned this before, but that Panopticon that big Panopticon show in Louisville is going to be while we're there. So that should be really cool. I'm hoping I came home for for that big like thrash fest thing. And that was really fun. Hopefully we'll be back. I know I'll be back sooner than later, but yeah, I try to stay on top with like luckily social media is a thing and seeing what my friends are doing via Instagram and whatever is a good way to kind of keep an eye on stuff. And I know all those names of those bands like Deal with God and everything. I really need to sit down and comb through Bandcamp or whatever and check them out. I always want to support my friends, so like I know I need to check out Street Hassle, which is Dan's band there, and I wanted, I think is it Urban Camouflage, Trevor's newer band.
Yeah, with Bill Crate.
Yeah. I know that's a good. I mean, everything Trevor's done, I've really liked. So I want to know about his stuff too. It's great. It's great that there's still such a wellspring of creativity there for just angry music. Like it makes me really happy that it's been a continuing thing. I know it ebbs and flows and venues come and go and everything. It's just wild to think that like that kid Lucas he's when he was not born yet when I started going to shows, and it's like I get that I can conceptualize my age. I know that I'm in my mid 40s, but it's cool. It's cool that it's this generational,
and he's busting his ass doing some good stuff for the city. It's good to see the speed that's still going on. It's good to see the hardcore is still huge here.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's awesome. I saw footage, not just hardcore, but like, well, what also is cool. I mean, I know that old guard, like metal dudes older than me, are probably aren't happy about it or whatever. I've touched on that a few times on this podcast, but I think it's cool that like there's younger kids that kind of come from hardcore that are playing like real quality death metal. Case in point, Undeath. I saw the footage of them playing outside there. Like, I think it was like towards the end of COVID when outside gigs were kind of happening a little bit. And that they looked great. And the singer like gave a shout out to like Black SS and Hunted Down. Now, it's weird seeing those two worlds mix because they were this underground death metal band that was blowing up on signing to, I don't think they'd signed a Prosthetic yet. They might have, but I've been following everything they'd been doing. I discovered them through YouTube. My friend Ken from Ken's Death Metal Crypt like showed off their demos. It's like, yeah, new death metal band from Rochester. And I was like, oh, awesome. I like their sound. And then I check out their video and they're giving a shout out to a band that I roadied for. It's kind of weird. I'm like, oh, cool. It makes sense. They're from Rochester. They're younger guys. Like, why wouldn't they, be into that stuff? But it's just kind of an odd cross-pollination of stuff that I'm into. And like Hex told me that like their old band sounded like Touche Amore or something like that, like something that wasn't death metal at all. So very interesting to me.
The singer, when I was playing bass in that band Department, I can't remember the fucking name of their band, but the singer was in a band, and he was on stage. They were opening for the Appleseed cast, and he was wearing a Gorguts shirt, and like he completely out of place. I was like, this guy's in the wrong fucking band, and and then Undeath got fucking huge. I can't believe how big that band is. I still haven't seen them live. Great live. But and I admittedly wasn't too big on the first record, but once It's Time to Rise from the Grave came out, I was sold. Like that.
Yeah, such a riff, man. Such a good riff on that song. And it's interesting too, because I mean, I'm working on reissuing some classic Syracuse stuff that kind of had equal footing in metal and hardcore from the '90s. And I remember that period from the late '90s, and it was like really exciting because kids that were getting into metallic hardcore were taking cues from, I mean, at first it was just the thrash metal big four kind of bands, but by the time Order of Deceit and other bands of that ilk, the Hate Thousand bands from Europe and all that stuff started coming around, like it was like straight edge dudes that were really into death metal, that were probably cut from the same cloth that I'm from, like that were maybe into death metal first and then got into hardcore, or in my case, it's just I wanted more like straight up death metal, but it wasn't happening as much, just like I was just talking about. So like, I think Order of Deceit was really great. You had, even though I think they started out as more of a straight up death metal band, like Lethargy from Rochester, as they progressed, like started to appeal more to hardcore kids. I don't know. You had like Dead Guy kind of weaving in like a Human Remains influence. All the early metalcore stuff seemed so organic, where these bands just like they liked hardcore and they liked death metal and they ended up together. And then I don't know what happened, but I really stopped, like bands that kind of came from that a few years later, I really didn't like. I think just the whole like homogenization of just like watered down at the gates riffs and clean singing and stuff, like I just hated that like a couple of years later. But that period between like I want to say like 95, 96 and like 99 was really cool. Like you had like Year of Our Lord and all these awesome bands that were just like shredding. Even early Cave In, like everybody kind of thinks of them as this space rock band, but their early stuff like completely fucking destroyed. It was awesome.
I remember seeing them when they were playing songs from Until Your Heart Stops, and they were new songs, and just being like, wow, this shit's fucking crazy. And then when they did Jupiter, it took me probably like 10 or 11 listens before I started to appreciate it, because I love the so much.
Yeah. And I honestly should go back and listen to that stuff, because I mean, I didn't have an open ear to anything mellow until I was like probably like 26 or something. Like I just didn't, I would listen to, I mean, the only things that I listened to that wasn't like loud and aggressive was like goth, and then I think some mutual friends of ours like Grant Johnson and Devlin and people like that got me into like, like psych music and folk and weird shit. And I got more, um, more into that. What's the name of the band that I keep forgetting because it's such a simplistic name? The band that was like the space rock band that influenced Cave In to completely change their sound. Fantastic Planet. That's the name of the
Failure.
record. Failure. I was listening to that at work the other night, and I still don't totally get it. Like I'm something about it's very like 90s like alterna poppy, but aspects of it a little bit deeper into the record I really dig. I know it's like I don't mean to be blasphemous or anything. Like I know a lot of people like really, really count that as a massive influence. Just hasn't clicked with me yet. But I know that that record was super important. Um,
I dated a girl for a while who was into anything Kenny Andrews did, so I heard a lot of that stuff, a lot of the Failure stuff, and like Year of the Rabbit and Autolux, and like anything that guy got his hand on. Like I pretty much heard quite a bit. Fantastic Planet it's cool for moments of it. It's a hard listen to the whole record start to finish.
yeah, I can see that. I mean, I'm always trying to find stuff that I'm not going to totally bum out my coworkers with at work because everybody it's an odd scenario because everyone will be like, oh, it's so quiet in here. I'm like, put on some music on your phone. Like it doesn't sound great when it's on your phone, but if you really are that uncomfortable with silence, just put some music on. And they're like, well, you have the speaker. I'm like, do you want to connect to it? It's okay. Like I can listen to anything. That's the thing. Like I don't even modern country doesn't bother me anymore. I don't really enjoy it, but it doesn't bother me. But they're always like, put something on. I'm like, okay, but you know what you're going to get when I put stuff on. Cause if it's not, I mean, I'm not going to listen to death metal at work, not on, a speaker. Like it's going to be just Depeche Mode and the Smiths and the Cure. Like you're going to get mopey 80s pop. Like if you're not cool with that, then don't ask me. But I'm always trying to, I'm like, once in a while, I'll be like, oh, I'll put on like, I don't know, Fairport Convention, Legion Leaf or something folky like that. Or maybe some like super early 80s hip hop that's like almost more funk than it is hip hop, really sonically. I have a few cool compilations with like Curtis Blow stuff and shit like that. I'll put that on. But
That's great. I was lucky
yeah,
enough to be raised by like my dad is a total progger. So I was lucky enough to be like raised on like Genesis and Pink Floyd and Yes and Doors and things like that. And my mom was really big on like country shit like Loretta Lynn and Reba McEntire and things like that. I still have a soft spot in my heart for Loretta Lynn. I have like a pile of like 8 of her LPs. I love her. But like, so I had a wide variety of stuff that I was listening to before I got into metal.
oh yeah,
So by the time like, I've met so many different people. Like you probably remember Tim Dog who did Axum Radar. He got me into like a lot of the industrial stuff like Download and the Tear Garden and anything that's like associated with a Skinny Puppy. He got me into like Lucio Fulci films and fucking like be Brain Dead for the first time. And then I met like Eugene from DPW who got me into like all these awesome punk bands. And
Eugene is the best, man. I miss that dude.
I have been trying to track Eugene down for years. And nobody knows where this guy is. He's not on social media. I've Googled his name. Like the closest thing I found thing is he wrote some article with Dan Berger, who used to be in Disgruntled Postal Workers.
I remember him too.
And I talked to Dan a little bit probably about 2 years ago. He wrote a book on prison reform, and he just got teaching in Pennsylvania. I think either in Philly or Pittsburgh. But I know he just got pretty recently in political science. I think.
I'm sorry, that bed cut out. What'd you say?
I believe he just got tenure teaching political science.
Oh, okay. I thought it was something job related, but in case it wasn't like he recently passed away, I would have been like, okay, sounds good.
Yeah, right.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, and that makes sense because that band was very outspoken about like a lot of socio-political issues. I mean, I was a punk kid, but I was an ignorant asshole back then. I was just like, I don't, whatever. I'm chaos. I hatred towards all. Like. I was pretty dumb back then. I could tell they were kind of just it was so nice. You know what I mean? They were like, okay, Pat, but think about this stuff. I'm like, whatever, man, I'm going to go get drunk. So that's good. That's good that they stuck with their story, so to speak.
Yeah. No, those guys.
Yeah, my parents too. I mean, it took me years to come around just with the stigma, especially if you're into punk or hardcore, and especially if you grow up in Syracuse too, because it's such a mainstream thing that all the meathead kids are into. But my parents were big Deadheads. And I mean, and that's the thing, like there is another podcast I was listening to, I think again, that Josh Lyons podcast. It was like, well, what was the first music you were exposed to live or first concerts, that that line of questioning that's so popular. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, well, my first show was Yuppicide at the Lost,
Ooh.
and I never went to a big concert before that. And then I thought about it, and I remember going to being at a ton of festivals with my parents, like outside hippie jam, being on a blanket, you know. And I was like, I probably saw the Grateful Dead like at least 2 or 3 times. I bet. But I completely appreciate. I don't, go out of my way to buy their records or listen to them frequently. But like American Beauty is awesome. Working Man's Dead is awesome. And my stepdad, who's great. I mean, he was a deadhead hippie dude. But when new wave and punk started to happen, it's not like he like cut off all his hair and was like wearing a torn trash bag and pogoing around or anything. But he was super into like more like power pop stuff. Like he was into Elvis Costello and the Pretenders, and the early Clash stuff, and that was always around when I was growing up. So I mean, that was like something that again, like I couldn't stand Elvis Costello for years and years until I really started to kind of appreciate the lighter side of 77 punk. The more poppy kind of shit, like the Undertones and from Ireland and stuff along those lines. And I was like, oh yeah, yeah, Elvis Costello fucking rules. Like what a great lyricist and stuff. And it's kind of similar way with like, I mean, as a little kid, speaking of Genesis, like I loved Phil Collins, like no jacket required. It's like the fucking Patton Oswalt joke. Like they're like, you want your kid to turn out all right. Never pretend to like anything cool. Talk about how No Jacket Required is your favorite record. But I legitimately loved that record as a kid and
I
never
love
knew.
all Phil Collins stuff. I love that shit. That fucking Hello, I Must Be Going. Fucking like
Yeah.
all that shit. It's all still. I still listen to it. I just listened to his greatest hits at work the other day.
Well, it's like, dude, I mean, straight up, people watching this, all 17 of you, when this ends, it's gotta wrap it up pretty soon, actually, because Griffin's across the hall and trying to go to bed. Try to keep my voice down. But when this wraps up, especially you younger folks that didn't grow up with MTV, which I don't know if any of you watch me, but go and YouTube the music video for Land of Confusion by Genesis. It's like a Dead Kennedys album cover. Like it's a nightmare. It's like Reagan and Gorbachev and they're like weird puppets. And like the song kind of rules too. Like it's not it's a pretty ripping. I mean, it's synthy and everything, but it's like very dramatic, like powerful, kind of dark song, But yeah, I love No Jacket Required. And that was like, I used to listen to that. I'd tape the Transformers and turn the sound off and listen to No Jacket Required and like Fat Boys. And it would look like the Transformers were like singing. That was my entertainment as a
You and I
child.
hung out as kids. We would have been best friends. Fucking
A couple of years we were apart. And that's the thing. Like I did not, you're one of those people, kind of like John Peters, where I didn't know you until the 2000s. Like, and I think it's because, again, like I lived in Boston from 99 to 2001. Somewhere in there, I met you a few times, but I didn't really get to be bros with you until like almost the end of the 2000s, I feel like. I remember I moved back and I hit you up for like, I was like, okay, John's the metal guy. And downloading hadn't quite, I think I was using SoulSeek, but for some reason I couldn't find it or something. I was like, I bet this dude has My Dying Bride. I haven't listened to My Dying Bride in forever. I'm like, dude, can you burn me some My Dying Bride? And I think that was like my first approach to you or something like that, like how I started talking to you.
I remember that. I remember the first time I met you was at Hungry Charlie's in Lyon. And like I went to some show by myself. My dad dropped me off. I can't remember what the fucking show was, but like I didn't know anybody, and I was just like some fucking dumb metal kid. You were like the first person that be like nice to me when I was on my own at a show. You know what I mean? And I would bump into you at like shows and I would like shoot the shit with you usually about you had like a Subhumans pin on your patch. It's like, I love the Subhumans. And I had like a pin on and like fucking then like I remember we started hanging out around the time that I moved back in with my parents for a short time. So I was right around the corner from you.
Oh, okay.
And you hit me up around that time, and you came and you picked me up and you taped me the Blood Runs Black demo because I didn't have the demo. I only had the CD, and I burned you some My Dying Bride CDs. I remember that. I remember that all very. That was actually a very good day at a very dark point in my life because like that whole month was really bad, but like that was a really cool night.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. Because I mean, it's funny. You've been on the planet for almost half a century, and like people will come up and tell me like, oh, remember, and like I like to think I do have a pretty good memory, and I do remember like pretty selective things. For instance, I went to Asheville, North Carolina, and hung out with my friend Nick, who he lived in Syracuse on and off, Albany for years. He's been all over the place. He was like a traveler, crust punk dude. I don't know if he ever hopped trains, but he was one of those guys, kind of like, you know, lived by the seat of his pants for a long time, kind of thing. And we spent a lot of time in Ireland and England together, and going to shows and stuff. And I mean, we were partying pretty hard, so I can understand the gaps in memory and everything. But we were telling stories and talking, and I'm like, he's like, I don't remember half of this stuff, dude. And I'm like, yeah, man, I don't know. You're younger. Your mind's like a steel trap. I definitely remember getting burned CDs from you, but I don't remember any. That was a weird period for me too, because I moved back to Syracuse, and I had for the first like 2 or 3 months that I was back, I was like looking for a place, and I was crashing on my grandmother's couch because my parents moved down to Florida. I was either crashing on my grandmother's couch, or I was crashing with Greg Peer in his practice space right in downtown there, like the corner of Salina and Genesee or whatever it was. And that place, like huge open practice space, carpeted, no bathroom. And it was just like, there was a separate room that was Greg's bedroom that had no door or anything. And like, it was real like Black Flag, like, you know, like just sleeping in the practice space kind of thing. And at that point I was like, I've done this a lot at this point, like sleeping in weird places. And, you know, Greg seems to be doing really good with this, and he's writing all this Mandate of Heaven stuff. You know, if you're native to the Syracuse area, you know, Mandate of Heaven's, that's like incredibly awesome, prolific indie rock band. That's like the main guy's been doing it forever, but he was really into his work at the time. And I was like, all right, this is cool, but like, I kind of want my own bed and stuff. And eventually I moved into that place with Billy and Michael, and it was like 2 coworkers of mine from Alto Cinco. And at that point I was like just starting to get back on my feet from, you know, like living in Maine, and like, because at that point, like, you know, you're in your early 20s, you have no idea what you're doing, you have no money, you know, you're kind of like dependent on the kindness of family and friends to like get back on your feet again. You know, at that point I wasn't partying at all anymore. I was straight edge, but like, yeah, it was also kind of a weird, desperate time for me too. And it was pretty emblematic of that time. Like, we all ended up moving out of there because our downstairs neighbor, they were doing heroin, and one of them died. So we all moved. We all moved.
Don't kill the vibe.
Yeah, we all moved up to the Westcott area. We're like, ugh, it was down on Lodi Street and stuff. So we were like, let's get the fuck out of here. Like, but anyway, yeah, it's a long rambling story, but yeah, it was, you know, it's kind of like a weird time at that time. Things also, to pull it around to something maybe more interesting to the people watching. I know that like in Syracuse at the time, there was, scene wise, things were in a big shift, because you had the Hellfests, which were huge. And I don't know, I didn't feel alienated by them going on or anything like that, but definitely, I mean, for me, and what I was into, like 75% of the stuff that was going on at those fests, I wasn't interested in. And yeah, I was more than happy for the promoters. Like, I didn't have money, and Keith was really cool about like, hey, help set up a few stages. I'll pay you $50 and you can get in for free, which was totally appreciated and great. But like, I just, you know, a lot of that swoopy hair, like metalcore shit, I fucking hated it. You know, Commit Suicide and bands like that, I was like, yes, this is great. But Circle of Dead Children and stuff too. But like, a lot of that I wasn't into. And then we had this little kind of sub scene. You know, the Lost wasn't doing much for whatever reason at the time. So the little sub scene around the Westcott Community Center I thought was really cool. I don't know if you were super involved with that stuff or not. I remember seeing you at some of those shows, but
I really played a few shows there, and I definitely went to a lot of the punk shows there.
Yeah. It was like a kind of a, like, okay, let's get back to basics, like raw, fast, hardcore kind of thing going on. With, of course, like Black Sheep Squadron. The Funeral was going. They played a lot of shows there. So that was a really cool time to move back there. But yeah, the beginning of me getting back there was a little bumpy for sure.
Yeah, fucking, sometimes, man, but you know, fucking, we always bounce back.
Yeah, oh, for sure. So you got the LP or the EP, 12-inch EP coming out. Any other plans for? Do you have kind of do you like schedule ahead for a dangerous meeting? Do you have like a calendar
I
filled
try
with?
to. I try to. A lot of times it sometimes things fall through, but I got some pretty cool ones coming up actually that I just interviewed Rob from One King Down.
Oh yeah. Okay.
If all goes well, I mean I've got it all set up. He hasn't sent me his list yet, but I'm setting up to interview fucking Steve and Andrew Miller from Unbroken.
Oh wow.
So that's that for me, like just like Overcast, like dude, like that's huge. Like Life, Love, Regret is like one of those albums that like helped me through such a fucking exactly. Dude, like,
I don't know why.
That would be thy fucking name, dude. Like that record is just the be all end all best hardcore album in my opinion. It strikes a chord with me still to this day. Like I can still relate to a lot of it. And it just like no other record in that genre has ever spoken such emotional truth.
Yeah. And it's just even beyond like, I mean, obviously the weight of the lyrics and just the whole execution of it, the production, it's got the immediacy of hardcore and those, I'd say like South of Heaveny kind of licks,
Oh, absolutely.
And it's done in such a tasteful way though. And what a cool band with a cool arc, because I like Ritual. I like the album before that, but it's almost like kind of like it's like Strife or something like that.
Right. It's just like, it's like Marshall Head fucking like tuned to fucking straight E, like Strife. Like it sounds like, called like All Out War, but with like a better production. Like all Earth Crisis EP All Out War, not the band. But like it's really good. The lyrics were a little juvenile. There's a song on there about how his mom hates him or something like that. Like how he has you don't hear my unheard cries. Fucking like it's the hate of my parents that I often fear. Like he was like, as a kid, I was able to fucking like relate to that. But I mean, if they were to play that now, I don't think they would play that song now.
Well, yeah, it's like listening to Dyer's Eve by Metallica. And like, look, I get what happened with James's upbringing there and the whole Christian Scientist thing, and I think that's horrible. But just like I remember getting Injustice for All. It was like one of the first heavy things I ever heard. And just being like, dear mother, dear father, like, didn't give me my allowance this week,
Yeah, like that, like suicidal institutionalized. You know what I mean? Like, all I wanted was a fucking Pepsi. God damn it!
But actually, I listened to an interview with Glennie Friedman. Do you know who he is?
No.
He's the guy. He's pretty iconic. Like if he wasn't around doing his thing, a lot. I think hardcore and hip hop and skateboarding would be pretty different. He's the dude he's done so many iconic photos of the old school Dogtown skaters, and all the early hip hop stuff that was on Def Jam. All those photos were him, and he also did a lot of iconic photos. They became iconic later. He put out books of photos of like Black Flag and Suicidal, and I guess he produced the self-titled Suicidal record. But he's such an interesting dude. Like he's like 60. He was on a skateboarding podcast called the Nine Club, and he's just still like so pissed and like arguing, like, because obviously skateboarding is really corporate now, like there's a lot of big money in it. He's like, no, that's not what it should be about. You fucking capitalist bullshit. Like he's just like yelling. I'm like, this guy's the best, man. This dude. But yeah, I don't even remember where I was going with that. But like that made me think about that. Like, yeah, because he was talking about one of the younger skaters on that panel. What made me think of that was, it's weird, like, because I don't think this person was familiar with Suicidal. He's like, music was different back then because the guy's singing and he's just singing about what's happening. And I'm like, yeah, that's the song he's talking about. Like people don't do that now to some extent, I guess. I don't know. It's funny to me. But anyway, yeah, all that stuff. I was lucky enough to catch Unbroken with Outspoken and Bloodlet, I think, at the Lost Horizon, and like that was pretty. I think I saw them another time too before Life, Love, Regret, if I'm not mistaken. And their later stuff I didn't get to appreciate for quite a while. Like they're more like, for lack of a better term, screamo or whatever.
Quicksandy kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that stuff's good too, though. I learned to love that stuff later.
I love it. I love everything that band has pretty much done. Like they've done some really great stuff, and even the stuff that they've done, like they're associated with, like Kill Holiday and fucking Julia and Swing Kids.
Oh, Swing Kids are great, man. Like Swing Kids are awesome.
All that stuff is good.
Yeah, Over My Dead Body came a little bit later. It was more of a straightforward kind of hardcore thing. And also the whole thing that, and I don't know if it was a good thing or not because the way it translated later was kind of gross, but I remember seeing and during their like more like post-hardcore kind of period, I remember seeing, I can't remember which member of the band it was. I think the guy that was in my Over My Dead Body, the dude with like the big pompadour or whatever, was like wearing like Christian Death shirts and like
Oh, fucking Rob Moran.
Rob Moran, yeah. Christian Death shirts and Bauhaus shirts and stuff. And like it was like him and Davey Havoc. Like you know, in the 90s and like when I got kind of burnt out on a lot of metallic music, my last year of high school, I was super into going to goth clubs and I was really into like industrial for a grip there. And it was cool to see like when a few years later when American Nightmare started coming around. And there was like, I never really got into AFI that much, but like they started coming around. I was like, oh, that's interesting. It's like these kind of hardcore bands where they're like repping goth stuff. I hadn't really seen that yet.
Yeah.
And I was into that stuff, but I was kind of on my own trip. But that was always like really, really cool to see. Do you have a favorite show that you've booked? Back in the day, would it be the Insanity show? That sounded like it was a pretty good one.
And that show was so fucking cool. You know what I mean? Like I really liked that show. It was the first show I ever did, but I do feel bad because I was only able to pay Dillinger $5 because we barely made the fucking the guarantee for hate breeding costs for Alarm, and like I was able, like I pulled like $60 out of pocket for Insanity, and they were more than thankful for that because they sold a shitload of merch. But Dillinger and Navi, I gave them each like the last $5 out of my fucking pocket. So here you guys go. You know what I mean? Like, and they were like, well, back then at least gas was only like fucking like 79 cents a gallon. So at least they got home on it, I guess.
I'm kind of reminded of like, it was a show that I helped book that was, again, it was kind of like a merge with a Keith and Hell special kind of thing where it was Drag Body and another Birdville Omen, I want to say, another Florida like kind of chaotic metal core-ish band. Those two bands that ended up playing with like a street punk show that I helped put on that was like the Cuffs and Violent Society and I think the Boils. So like
I remember that show.
That was a weird one.
I couldn't get it off of work. I was so pissed because I wanted to see Drag Body so bad.
I mean, it's kind of cool. Like the mixed bill thing, people have a different opinion of it, but like it can be really awkward. It doesn't always work. But sometimes it's really cool. And I feel like that was sort of a thing in the 90s. And it's kind of come back to that because I think this younger generation of kids that are in their teens and early 20s now are just as into, Madball as they are Japanese hardcore like Bastard or whatever. And I mean, you would see that a lot, especially like weird crossovers between grindy crust stuff and like abrasive fast hardcore and like emo. Because I remember there was another show that I didn't get to go to it. I was in Boston at the time, I think. But a friend of mine told me, I think it was Michaela told me about it. But I've seen flyers for it too. But it was all emo bands of the day. It was like Get Up Kids and Piebald and somebody else with Voorhees. And I was like, holy shit. But I mean, that would happen where like you'd get like these kind of crusty, because it would be a DIY show and you'd get like these kind of crusty bands sometimes or like power violence bands. And there was a bleed over between, I think, like some of the power violence stuff and some of the more like chaotic screamo stuff that some of the bands were kind of half and half. A lot of that stuff.
You would see like Reversal of Man playing with like Small Brown Bike, for instance.
Yeah. Yeah. Like Inhumanity. A lot of the Florida stuff seemed like somewhere it was chaotic and kind of off kilter and screamy the way the Gravity record stuff was, but it also leaned into grind. It was like Combat Wounded Veteran and Reversal of Man and Inhumanity and that kind of stuff. It kind of like was a precursor to The Locust and stuff that came later as the sun sets and shit like that, I would say. But you would see, occasionally it's like, yeah, Code 13's playing with Orchid, like that would happen, once in a while. It happened semi-frequently. You didn't see so much like kind of like mosh metal or militant metalcore-ish stuff playing with anything else. I feel like that's why I feel like it's kind of interesting seeing Drag Body with like an Oi band.
Right. sometimes it makes like go. I think it was annoying like for a while. I think maybe it was like the early 2000s, like the mid 2000s. Every metal show, like you'd be like, oh, all right, cool, I'm going to see Nile. But there'd be like 5 mosh bands opening up.
Oh
And
yeah.
oh my God, if I hear one more goddamn breakdown, I'm gonna fucking smash my goddamn head into the fucking wall, and not in a good way. You know what I mean? Like, but like,
Just like that.
yeah, exactly. But like, man, it's just like,
Yeah. Well, and there was that whole phenomenon too. Like when I lived in, when I was in Boston in like 99, 2000, the drummer in my old crust band, Class Action, he was super into all the death metal of the day, which I wasn't too familiar with. All this kind of more brutal stuff like Deeds of Flesh and Drawn and Quartered and all that stuff. I love that stuff now, but I was like kind of getting reintroduced to death metal through that guy. And we'd go out to the Palladium and we went to some of those earlier metal and hardcore fests, and they were ridiculous, man. Because it would be, not the big bands would play Nile and Cannibal Corpse and stuff, but they'd play with hardcore bands, the more metal leaning hardcore bands, and there'd be all these fights and all these steak neck fucking assholes like beating up on metalheads. It was awful.
Yeah, that was common, unfortunately. But going back, like I think, like sometimes, like going back to like the fucking the power violence and like emo thing together. Do you remember Wilkes-Barre Festival?
Yeah, I never went, but I know that Order of Deceit played, and I've seen flyers and stuff like that.
Like that year, the Order played. Like the first day was all power violence bands. Like you had like Reversal of Man, Ass Suck, fucking The Locust, Jenny Piccolo, My Lai, and then the second, but As Friends Rust opened the show, and then the second day was like Elliot and fucking Piebald and Adam and His Package, and it was. It was, but like it was like one day of power violence and one day of emo, and like like the fucking like the odd man out was like Order of Deceit because they were like the fucking like the crazy metal, and then Ink and Dagger headlined that night. But like fucking, it was a weird mixture, but like it was all the same kids who loved it. You know what I mean? It was the same kids who were there both days.
It's weird too because like years later, like Wilkes-Barre seemed like it was known more for like a youth crew revival and stuff like that. Like the Posse Numbers Festival was there 10 years later. It's all like like Construction Glove, Floor Punch kind of bands, that's cool. I like that stuff too. Yeah, and it's also kind of funny that it was like one day of power violence and one day of emo, because the straight up power violence bands, like the ones from California, the ones on Slap-a-Ham and 65 and stuff, like I think it was joking around most of the time, but there are lots of songs about like campaign for emo destruction, like backpack bonfire, and like that kind of stuff. A lot of spaz songs, like just talking about destroying emo and all this other kind of shit. There's like the classic guy throwing the thing away. Usually it's a a swastika or whatever. The figure throwing something in the trash, and it was like just the word emo. Like I saw that patch everywhere in the late 90s, early 2000s. So I guess there was beef, but most people I knew that liked emo at the time also liked power violence, and it was generally like not a lot of, at least in our town, there wasn't a lot of people that were into that. There was like a handful of kids, and we know who they are, that actually and like I wasn't fucking with emo then at all, and I still don't really, very very little. I dabble with, but I eventually got to appreciate bands like Heroin and the Gravity Records stuff that was like just really good discordant hardcore that was kind of arty. I liked that stuff after a while, and bands like Jihad and stuff like that was kind of metal I liked. But then again you're leaning back into like more of a power violence kind of thing. Is the indie rock kind of emo that I never really could stomach, but whatever.
I love that shit. Like I'm big on like the Ghetto Kids, and I love fucking Mineral and like Sunny Day and like the first couple Saves the Day records, and I love all that shit.
I tried. The closest I get is like Lifetime. I like Lifetime, and they're more of a pop punk band, I guess, or like melodic hardcore or something. Yeah, here we go. Hell Nation at War with Emo 5-inch. There you go. Hell Nation. I was saying to John, I got to see Hell Nation off stream. I saw them in England, and they were incredible. Yeah, and like bands that were like kind of the Louisville stuff, like I can get down with like Enkindle a little bit, and like Endpoint I loved. Like their later stuff was kind of emo, and the DC bands that are credited for starting it, of course, like Embrace and Dag Nasty. I love that shit. But who knows? Like I do this once in a while, once every couple of years. I get tired of what I'm listening to and I go on a weird deep dive, I very could be like 47 and like all of a sudden like just like scrambling on Discogs to own every Piebald record. Like I'm not ruling that out. Like that may happen. Like I did that.
Dude, weird things happen, man.
Well, I did that a few years ago with like the more like Gravity Records screamy scrams or whatever you want to call it now. Like where like I listened to Heroin and that was about it. But then I went on a deep dive of like getting all that stuff on CD because it was pennies on the dollar to buy those bands' discography CDs. Giddy.
Oh, man. Sorry. My cat was wanting to get up here, so I had to pick him up.
All right. He's a good looking kitty right there.
Yeah, he's an old man. He's like 16 and a half years old.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
wow.
He's my bear. That's Mr. Marley right there.
It's around pretty big still. All right. Well, it's usually around here that I start to wrap things up. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I want to be respectful of your time, as that dude from the Heavy Hole says. Any closing thoughts? Anything that you'd like to share that I either like babbled over you or anything like that at all?
I mean, thanks for having me, man. This is fucking cool. It's awesome to be fucking interviewed instead of doing all the interviews I've done. It's cool being on the other side of it. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I just like to talk to people, I'd calling it an interview is probably a stretch, but I mean, I just like to shoot the shit, especially with people that like yourself I talk to you all the time online and all that kind of stuff, but it's great getting together face to face. And also I have this relatively small platform of like people that are pretty like, thankfully pretty loyal and tune in every week and everything. And it's kind of cool. It's like, here's my friend. Hey, everybody, this guy's cool. You should check out his stuff. And in the comments or in the however I work it out, I'll put a link to your radio stuff. Do you ever think of like just putting it? Is it available as a podcast or is it just like on the website?
It's hard. I want to get it as a podcast, but it's difficult because like owning the rights to all the songs and being able to play them. But what I do have, and I have probably about like 30 of the episodes uploaded as a SoundCloud. And
okay.
I haven't uploaded anything in a while, but pretty fucking lazy about it. But actually, it's on my to-do list this week is to get caught up and put more stuff up there. So everything will be up on the SoundCloud. Cool.
Okay. Yeah, but I'll put all kinds of necessary links in the description of this when it goes up and all that kind of shit, so people can support and your bands and everything that I can possibly find. Your social security number. No, just kidding.
Cool.
Routing number. No. But yeah, no, thanks for being on. I mean, I'll be talking to you soon because there's a couple things where I'm kind of collaborating with you on or all that kind of stuff. But
fucking
keep that under my hat at the moment. But yeah. Thank you so much, John.
Dude, thank you for having me, man. To get your ass back to Syracuse and go back to fucking Hydes and get some hot dogs, man.
We'll hit up Hydes, man. We'll hit up Hydes. It'll probably, I'm not gonna say, I don't think it'll be more than like, it might be about a year before I make it back, but I don't think it'll be any longer than that because
cool.
I get homesick and I still have a handful of family that I'd like to see up there and all that kind of stuff. So, but yeah. All right, man.
All right, dude. It's great to fucking talk to you. Thank you again for having me, man. This is a fucking blast.
All right. Thanks everybody for watching. I'll
Thank
be
you
back next week with Melanie Loves Death Metal. Peace out.
Later.